It's come to my attention that the company called Async inside of Kane Pixel's Backrooms universe has never really been examined or explained in any deep capacity here on YouTube. So today I'm changing that because I want to dive into Async as a company. I want to break down what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the conspiracies, lore, and cryptic clues that we have about the company that might lead us to their downfall. The main focus for this video today is going to be around the inconsistencies and strange happenstances that occur surrounding Async. So if you like lore, you're gonna have a fun time today. Sit back and relax, and let's get into it, shall we? Most of you have obviously heard the name Async, or you've at least seen it pop up while watching a found footage video or in the talks about the series, but Async itself is actually very, very integral to the entire Kane Pixel's lore system. It's kind of the factor that's driven everything. The Async Foundation itself was a research and development company that was founded in Southern California sometime before the 1980s. We don't have an exact date, but the 80s, early 70s, and 90s is when the series takes place. The initial goal of the Async company was not to tap into the backrooms or interdimensional planes. It was actually a biomedical research facility and company that focused on engineering kind of new age medicines. Soon after its inception and its creation in general, the company would move its foundation from biomedicine and it would focus itself on reaching another goal: solving future and current housing and storage needs. Now, to understand why Async pivoted from being a biomedical research facility to trying to find another interdimensional plane like the Backrooms, we have to learn about one key player in the game of Async, the man named Ivan Beck. Now, Ivan Beck is essentially one of the main characters, if not the main character of Kane Pixel's Backrooms series. He's the sole reason the company Async even attempted this new technology to tap into the Backrooms, and he's essentially the catalyst behind everything. His life before Async is a little murky, but we do have little bits of information surrounding it. He was a scientist that was very interested in nuclear particles and that sort of thing, a real nerd type. And eventually the company Async kind of found out what he was doing, thought he was the man for the job to work on this project, hired him on, and the rest is history. In April of 1988, Ivan Beck held a press conference to discuss this new project, what would go on to be called the Backrooms, and he phrased it as the way to solve future, current, and probable storage and housing issues that would arise due to overpopulation, which maybe he was onto something, I don't know. His label at Async is actually the vice director, which is pretty interesting because he actually seems to be the one kind of making the shots, calling every single play. So it could be the fact that he actually runs Async now and has been promoted, and the only reason he calls himself vice is because he doesn't want any blame when things go bad. It does go bad. But Ivan Beck himself is indeed the key player to all of this. The only information we have pre his job and his professional life is that he was born in 1931 in Czechoslovakia. Specifically, he was born in a city known as Karlovy Vary. Now, obviously, he was born in the 1930s in the European theater when some bad things were happening in Europe and across the world. So him and his family picked up and they moved to the United States when he was a child because you wouldn't want to be in Czechoslovakia in the 1940s. So he came here and that's how he got to the United States. He went to school, he loved science, he loved math, and like I said, he studied nuclear particles and that sort of thing. He was very interested in helping people, which is why in the 70s and 80s, he was hired by Async to work on a project called KV-31. The goal of KV-31 was to study electromagnetism, with the ultimate endgame being a creation of what's called a low proximity magnetic distortion system. Or simply put, the nerds at the science offices were trying to create a threshold doorway to a different dimension. That's what that means. Thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video. Everyone's been there before. It's late at night, you're laying in bed, you get a random phantom pain in your body, and you go to Google and you try to search what caused it, only to be told by the internet that you have cancer. So instead of spiraling at midnight, convincing yourself something is wrong, you could have easily just booked a real doctor using today's sponsor, ZocDoc. ZocDoc makes it easy to find the right doctor for you, efficiently, and without having to call an office and ending up getting put on hold and all that stuff. ZocDoc is a free website where you can easily search and compare high-quality in-network doctors that fit your needs to find the right one for you. Appointments with with ZocDoc also happen fast, typically within the first 24 to 72 hours of booking. Sometimes you can even score same-day appointments, and you don't even have to call anybody. ZocDoc also isn't just for one type of care. They have more than 100,000 providers across nearly every specialty, from mental health to dental health, to eye care to skin care, and much more. ZocDoc is a one-stop shop for all your healthcare needs. Plus, it is completely free, so stop putting off doctor's appointments and stop spiraling at nighttime trying to think something's wrong with you, and go to ZocDoc.com/Brugly to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to it. Now, the project name, KV-31, is also not random. That comes from KV, Karlovy Vary, where Ivan Beck was born, and 31 for 1931, the year he was born. For nearly a decade, Async attempted to get this experiment to work and use that low-proximity magnetic distortion system to create different hypotheses and different theories. The Async research team and project KV-31 would go on to create a prototype of this machine they were working on. It's in the video, the prototype video. But at this point in the story, there's still so many unknown things about the Async company, about Ivan Beck, and everything in between. And I definitely have, and you guys probably have, a few questions regarding that. For one, it seems kind of strange that their first instinct, their first idea as to how to fix the housing and storage problem is to tap into an interdimensional plane that may or may not swallow the world whole through null zones. Seems kind of strange. Like, could you just find something in the normal world that fixes that issue? It kind of seems like they're trying to cover up or mask the real objective of KV-31. They probably are. Number two, Ivan Beck's background is enigmatic at best, because I still haven't talked about the current events that Ivan Beck has experienced. He was born in the middle of nowhere, Europe. He was eventually a scientist. He came to be this great scientist, and he was hired under a top secret research facility to work on this project to tap into the Backrooms, which would go on to be known as the Complex. It all is very fishy. And at this point in the chronology of everything, in the storyline of everything, there are some major cracks starting to form with the Async company. And now we're going to get into all those cracks and the strange things that have happened in the modern series as it's going right now. Pretty much everything I just discussed is the background, what's led up to the main series. In the episode titled Backrooms Overflow, we see just that. Little experiments gone wrong, showing the world being overrun and this green light kind of seeping into it. In that video, the camera cuts to this corkboard that has a ton of lore just directly on it. There's papers, there's maps, there's all that sort of stuff, there's instructions, and all of that is going to give us some clues as to what Async might be up to. For instance, the map on the top of the board is something I want to point out first, because it's a map from 1964 showing every main oil and gas pipeline in the United States. And if you know the United States for one thing, they love their oil. So why was that in the map? Is there like kind of a secret alternative? They have discussed the complex as being a way to transport oil safely, but you never can trust what the US is doing with the oil. The issue with the overflow video is that it takes place 10 canonical years before everything else, which means all the way back in 1971, which is when this video was, Ivan Beck was already interested in this movement and in this complex and trying to find out how to get oil to move through the backrooms and all that kind of stuff. It was an idea long before the main series, which takes place in the late 80s, early 90s. All I'm saying is, if you haven't seen my spoogly video titled Oil is Sentient, you're missing out. One thing we do know is that the video Overflow, that correlates directly with a real-life thing that happened, known as the solar flares of August 1972. And this was a side effect of those experiments that went wrong, or they caused the experiments to go wrong. The two is debated. But it's because of these solar flares that we get a very important piece of lore about Ivan Beck. While conducting this experiment in the Overflow video and the solar flare happening, Ivan Beck was exposed directly to a solar flare staring at it. He lost vision in an eye, and he also developed amnesia, PTA specifically. So during that 10-year gap from 1972 to 1982, when things begin to pick up with the complex, Ivan Beck was going through amnesia and the injury from that accident looking at that solar flare. Ivan can only remember small bits and pieces of what he did or what happened in those 10 years. So we're here as the viewer just as confused as Ivan is. Like, we have no idea what happened in those 10 years, and neither does he really. He's kind of trying to figure it out as he goes. The events of Overflow overflow likely take place in New York. However, at the time of the series beginning in the 80s and 90s, that's taking place in California. So again, this goes to show that Async has been working on this for a long time. So at this point, we're caught up with the main events of the series. The early 70s, late 60s, whenever, Ivan Beck was doing some experiments, Ivan Beck got hired, and the overflow events happened in 72, along with the solar flares, which gave Ivan amnesia. Fast forward 10 years of unknown, Ivan doesn't know either, we're now almost at the Backrooms main series part. The next thing that happens in the chronology of the lore that I want to discuss is how temporal anomalies are going to affect everything. Time travel, essentially. Because it's at this point in the series when time travel is introduced, and I think it's going to be a major key player in the future of everything. It starts small in the informational video that's on CanePixel's channel, when at the beginning, you can see the timestamp of the camera says February 29th, 1990. Only 1990 is not a leap year. And then later in the same video, a researcher and an explorer, Peter Tench, is thrown 2 months into the future. He walks down a hallway after hearing a bunch of chattering, and he's literally thrown directly 2 months ahead. However, for him, this only goes on to be about 4 or 5 hours. When Peter goes to the future, he's thought to be dead. He was on this expedition with Marvin, George, and Ronald, who all eventually realized that when Peter vanished, it kind of was sus. It might have been like a very strange temporal anomaly, and it's just going to get worse for them. Peter is actually a very instrumental part of the entire lore system, even if it doesn't seem like it, because after his death, this is when the Async company and the government of the United States kind of begin to quarrel. After he went missing, his death was swiftly covered up by the government of the United States. And the people that were with him, all those guys, Marvin, George, and Ronald, they obviously were sussed out. They were like, okay, the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, the government, they are trying to cover up my friend's death. He died, or he went missing, and they're trying to go on like nothing happened. And that takes us to the video titled Static Dead End, which shows us that the government is indeed trying to cover up what happened. Now, while Peter is gone, he doesn't actually disappear for 2 months, it's just a few hours, and he's wandering around the back rooms trying to find the way out. And before he escapes the complex to get back to reality, he ends up, attacking people and all that kind of stuff, and he eventually does get out, and he's kind of insane, and he's kind of going through amnesia, and he's losing his mind, he's trying to be treated for it, and it's all this whirlwind of craziness. Obviously, being trapped and going missing and everything, that'll do a number on you, especially when you're gone for, years at a time. They had a funeral for him. His wife and children thought he died, but he didn't, and that can make anybody go insane. Eventually, after getting treatment, Peter tries to get back inside of the back rooms, and he eventually gets back out, and he eventually escapes the Async facility, only to die while running down the hill on the side of the facility, hitting his head on a rock. Now, I'm not one to say government cover-up, but that is a government cover-up. Peter Tench did not fall and die. He was killed. That's my opinion. So just in those few years, we got the time travel aspect, the distortions, and the people going insane and trying to murder their own crew members. The government's covering up Peter's death. Things are falling apart at Async. Okay, so at this point, if you've watched the found footage videos and everything involved, you're gonna understand the timeline that I've explained, all the events leading up to now. And you're probably wondering the same exact thing I am. What the heck is Async even doing in the backrooms? They haven't really done anything. Think about it. These experiments were beginning in the 70s, and then throughout all of the 80s, right? Because the main series begins in the early to mid 90s. That's like the found footage series. All the other lore gap filler videos, those are like the prequels that happened, before the 70s and 80s. That's like 10 to 15 years of time where they could have done something. Yet when we see the protagonists, the cameraman and stuff, go into the backrooms and fall into it and explore it, there's like hardly any evidence at all of Async or let alone anybody else. Remember, Async's goal was to use the backrooms as a housing project and to fix travel and storage needs. Yet when we get there after all this time, none of that's there. So what are they actually doing? Let's talk about it. Ivan Beck is famously quoted in this series as saying that compromise is the death of innovation. And that is really the quote that drives him. Because Ivan is a troubled man, right? He experienced this accident, this amnesia is taking over him, and the complex itself, it's luring Ivan in to go deeper and to try to explore it further, to find what he's looking for, right? He's pretty much, it's his muse, and he can't stop thinking about it. Maybe when Ivan began this series of the low electromagnetic force thing to tap into the backrooms, maybe it was with good intentions at the start. We know that he wanted to help people. We know that he came from a troubled background from where he was raised and born. We know that. But after the accident, it seems like these issues, this obsession with the backrooms has been his forefront of everything he's done. Even the best intentioned person can be pushed to their limits, and he's suffering this amnesia. He's just trying to find everything that he missed out on, his answers to everything, and it's causing him to dig deeper and do more experiments to make bigger openings into the backrooms and all that. That's what he's doing. So maybe that is why there's the lack of the async stuff in the backrooms in the found footage series. Maybe Ivan's not worrying about building it up to help people. Maybe he's only in it for himself. The government's involvement is also another major key player in what async is doing, because it's just been more and more prevalent ever since its inception, to the point where the async researchers got extremely suspicious and they were essentially being controlled by the government. Probably every single call they make to their superiors, to their coworkers, is being monitored. Think of Stranger Things. It's that sort of vibe. So why is that? Why is everything so turmoily? Well, if you remember back when they first tapped into the backrooms, when it was first accessed and the doorway was opened, this caused earthquakes, it caused people to vanish. That's where you get the missing people video, and it caused essentially null zones to form. I mean, we ripped open a space-time continuum breach and we jumped through it. Of course, it caused those bad things. Well, the government and Async have plans since that first opening to make a second opening, a bigger opening, to fit 18-wheelers through, and to fit houses through, and to fit all these materials through. Well, we opened a small little doorway. Imagine what would happen if we opened a doorway 5 times that size. Everything would become more unstable. The null zones would grow. People would fall in at a greater rate. Probably groups of people would fall in. It would be more, havoc, more earthquakes. Everything would be bad. So my thought process is that the government has essentially overtaken Async's research into this and kept pushing to go deeper, to go more, and to open up these bigger doorways. And by doing that, opening the bigger doorway, it caused so much instability. People are going to fall in. Maybe an entire Async research facility will fall in. Maybe everybody researching the backrooms is going to fall into the backrooms and merge with it. And that's why we don't see much innovation or any innovation at all in the found footage series. Like I said, and I'll keep saying it, it's been, 5 to 10 years since they tapped in and they haven't done anything. That's pretty strange. So I'm positing that's because they opened that bigger gateway and it all went to hell, pretty much. The person that would take it the hardest if the government took over the project completely and just enforced all control would be Ivan Beck, because at this point he's obsessed with going deeper and trying to see what there is to find and discover in the backrooms. He's less worried about helping people with the housing and all that, and he's more worried about filling in the holes of what he's missed. If the government was there to oversee it, he couldn't really be doing that. So what links would Ivan go to find what he's looking for? Would it be him signing off, giving the government the okay to make that doorway? Because he'll know what happens if that happens, because it'll tear everything to shreds. It'll essentially have everything crumble in on each other, including his own researchers. And that's a theory that I've seen growing in the community and from the YouTuber like Red, for example. Go check out her videos, they're really good. But they posit that these null zones will continue to grow in excess and become larger, right? The ones we've seen so far, they're pretty small. They're like little squares or little parts of reality. But what if they were the size of buildings or streets? And they're going to become more and more unstable the more you tap into the backrooms, and that's just going to happen more and more if the government takes over. So maybe that is why nothing's happened in the backrooms and it's not built up. It's not trying to help people. Whatever you think is going to happen in the lore system and in the Backrooms series, it's far from being done. The series is not complete by any means. But one thing is for sure, there are so many missing pieces to everything. There's tons of new stuff that's going to come out to kind of fill in the gaps. We're going to figure out what Ivan Beck's up to, what the government's up to, if Async is even doing anything, or if their company's dissolved or fell into the Backrooms or whatever happened. This video has mostly just been kind of my crackpot brain talking about the history of Async and maybe a few theories as to why they haven't done anything in the Backrooms, even though they've been in there for like 10 years. But one thing we can tell essentially is that Async as a company is cooked. They're probably going to be taken over, or they're going to fall into the Backrooms. People are going to go missing, people are going to die, there's warping, temporal anomalies, it's just going to get worse. All the while the government's trying to keep it under wraps, everything is going to burst at the seams eventually. Maybe the dramatic end to the series is that Ivan Beck finds what he's looking for, finds what fills in the gaps. Maybe he will succeed, but what cost will it take for him to succeed? It'll be the death of everything and everybody that he's held dear and worked with. I don't know. Maybe this video makes no sense, but I really hope you enjoyed it. I had a fun time putting it together. These kind of theory videos are really fun to make. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching to the end, and hopefully Ivan Beck finds what he's looking for. Peace.